Optometry is an incredible profession. Every day, we get to help patients live their best lives and make an impact in their lives. Now, the million-dollar question I always get asked is, how do you navigate your career in optometry and your identity? It's a very thin line and it's difficult to really straddle. But on today's podcast, we have an expert that has truly mastered this. Friends and family, we're hanging out with the one and only Dr. Artis Beatty. Let's go. This is a Defocus Media production. What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover.
And I'm Dr. Jennifer Lyerly, resident optometry nerd.
And welcome to Defocus Media, optometry's #1 podcast, where we discuss the hottest topics, latest technology, eyewear, practice management, and more. So sit back, relax, and defocus. What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover. Super excited to be here today. We have a true star in the building. Now, you guys have heard me mention this gentleman's name probably a million times on the podcast. When I talk to you about mentorship, when I talk to you about a brilliant mind, when I talk to you about someone that has changed the eye care game on all aspects of the eye care game, this is that gentleman. Friends and family, I'd like to welcome my colleague, my mentor, my guy, Dr. Artis Beatty. How are you doing today, Dr. Beatty?
And I'm doing great, and I am so excited to talk to you today. I mean, we've talked about this for quite a while, and we have not gotten to be able to be together. And so I hope I can live up to the hype, man, because this is really exciting for me. I feel privileged to be a guest.
Hey, man, I'm super excited to have you. Like, I have top 5 people that I've always wanted to interview, and you're definitely one. And one of the main reasons why is because of the impact that you've had on me. I remember yesterday, and I've told this story several times, I graduated from optometry school and I was in the practice with you seeing patients. And there's 2 things, really. I walked out the exam lane and I wanted to get your opinion about something. And I don't know if you remember this or not. And you looked at me and said, Darryl, you're the doctor. You don't need a second opinion. You went to optometry school. You know exactly what you're doing. Get back in there and make it happen, right? And that always stuck with me, right? That built my confidence. So people that are saying that, hey, Darryl, you're a little too overconfident, y'all could blame Dr. Beatty. He's the one that told me, right? The other thing that I wanted to kick off with was, when I first got out of school, I was just really trying to figure out, how to navigate, where I was going to go with my career. And you told me to read a book. And this was the book that you told me to read. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, my career has been able to grow, prosper. I've been able to make an impact because of the guidance that you've created with me. Now, today, I really want to have a solid conversation with you because you've done so much. And the way that you've been able to balance your career in optometry and your identity, to me, is just unmatched. And speaking to a lot of students, pre-optometry, optometry, and even new graduate doctors, this is a common question that I get asked. So I really want to dive deep into this, but before we kick the party off, I think we got to get to know you a little bit. So if you don't mind sharing how you got into optometry and your backstory as well, my friend.
Fair enough, man. I feel like I'm getting ready to tell my X-Men origination story here, because like most optometrists, I got to start in optometry because of the profession's impact on me. So I was back in the 4th grade or so, and I remember sitting in a little classroom in rural North Carolina, and we were preparing to do an art show. And I was not a great artist, despite my name, and but I was excited about this show. And we were doing it offsite, and I was writing down the directions as the teacher was giving them to us. And looking back on it, I became a very good listener because I needed to be able to hear what was happening in order to be able to record it, because I could not see very well and didn't realize that. And so I was misspelling something, and the teacher walked by and said, well, it's on the board. And I looked up at the board and I didn't see anything. Like I
Wow.
saw the dark board, but nothing written on it, period. And she said, "Oh, you can't see that." And I was like, "No." And she gave me a little note. I went home. My parents took me to see an optometrist, a local optometrist in the next town over. And I got a pair of glasses. And on my drive home, I saw leaves on trees for the very first time.
Wow.
And I was so impacted by that visit that I told my mom, as a fourth grader, I'm going to be an optometrist. And
Wow.
she looked at me and she said, "Okay, we'll see how that works out. We'll follow and see." And little did we know that was really a serious decision, and that's where I've ended up. And
Wow.
so the profession just means so much to me because, to your earlier point, we have the ability to impact people on a daily basis, and there's not many times that you get to be in a situation where you get to do that and experience it multiple times per day. And optometry has just been that for me.
I want to get into
Sure.
where you went to your undergrad, because being in North Carolina, you and I, we have a little bit of beef that people may not know of. I graduated from NC State, and you graduated from where, my friend?
Carolina,
Okay.
Carolina.
All
But we
right.
don't have beef. We're friendly. We're friendly. We just had different paths to get to where we are, and so no beef.
Well, hey, you know what's crazy? People tell me I'm a little confused now, Dr. Beatty, because I grew up a Carolina fan, believe it or not. I grew up during that time where there was Eric Montross, Donald Williams, Stackhouse, Wallace, all of those players. I could tell you their age, their height, their stats, all that stuff. Then I ended up going to NC State, go Wolfpack, but now I live in Durham, right? So they say go Duke.
Oh,
People say I'm a little
yeah.
confused, a little lost in the sauce when it comes to basketball, but I'll be honest, it's not what it used to be when I was younger as far as college basketball goes. So now I'm just pro ACC more than anything, right?
Yeah, yeah, and and that's one of those things that's perspective too. When you're younger, it's funny you say you grew up with these folks at Carolina. I was in class with these folks at Carolina.
Oh man.
And so yeah, I had a class with Dante Calabria. I had one with Donald Williams.
Wow.
I literally ran into Jerry Stackhouse and dropped my ESPN or my Sports Illustrated, where he was on the cover, and
Wow.
picked it up and asked him if he would sign it because I ran into him. And so it was the time that I was actually there. But when you're in it all the time, you develop this "I got to breathe it, live it, believe it" kind of mentality. And when you're outside of it looking back, you understand where you were.
Yeah.
But to that point, you kind of now understand why everybody is where they are, right?
Right.
And so I definitely want Carolina to win, but I'm not mad when it doesn't happen.
I love it. I love it. And talk to me about optometry school. Where did you go? There's so many options out there. Where did you decide to go?
So I ended up going to Nova Southeastern down in Fort Lauderdale, Davie, Florida, and it was a fantastic experience for me. And I will tell you, this was back in the early 2000s, and Nova was really making a name for itself. And what was really cool is that it had a bunch of different health professions in the same environment, and it was an unbelievable way to learn about optometry because we took anatomy with the osteopathic medicine students. We took pharmacology with the pharmacy students. We took head and neck anatomy with the dental students. So it was a real opportune time to not just learn about optometry and the way it fits into health professions, but to learn about the things that the other health professions were actually doing,
Yeah.
and them getting a respect for what optometry does as well. And so it was a fantastic decision for me to go down there.
So was that strategic? You knew that's how the classes were, that you were in the specific courses that pertain to that profession or to that career that those students were going to take? Because when you think about it, I'd rather be around someone that's, in that sector of what they're going to specialize in, because it seems like you'll get better knowledge and be better prepared for your boards and all that other jazz.
I would love to be able to tell you that was strategic. It was not strategic, but it turned out to be a fantastic decision. So if I rewind just a little bit, when I was in Chapel Hill, I actually worked as a technician at practice, and within that practice, I was learning all these things about great patient care. And the business of optometry was part of what was happening there as an independent practitioner, but I quickly realized how complicated it had to be, right? And so we're talking 30 years ago. So managed vision care was on the scene, but it was really a lot of manual billing. It was really trying to take hold. This was in a time when 1-800 Contacts was just starting to partner with independent optometry to look at ways to get patients their contact lenses. And I thought to myself, I really want to do this, and I know I'm going to optometry school, but at some point, I would like to understand the business of optometry more, or at least how to help run a clinical practice. And so I first went to Nova, not as an optometry student, but as a business student. So I went into a master's program for business, and while I was there, I kept working in optometry. So I worked at the Eye Institute, which was the clinical arm for the School of Optometry. I got to learn a lot more about equipment. I learned about making glasses in labs. I learned about the cost structure, and I got to work with and know a lot of students in optometry. And it gave me a really different insight because in my world, I was coming from a clinic.
Yeah.
In their world, they were coming from whatever educational background they had. And most of them had never actually worked with patients until they got into optometry school. And so I spent a lot of time helping them understand, okay, if you're going to make a recommendation about this or that, this is what you need to think about from a glasses perspective, because I was buying equipment and I was working in the lab. And so I could give them some type of background. And it was the first time I really thought, man, not only do I like optometry now, I've learned a little bit more about how to run the business. I really now want to help other optometrists so they can do the business side better too.
Wow. I mean, this all makes sense now. I'm putting together all the pieces of the puzzle. And I think this really sets us up for a fantastic conversation moving forward. Where do we stand right now when it comes to your career? I think this is a great opportunity to talk about how do you navigate optometry careers, because there's so much that you can do. You can come out of school and you can be an optometrist where you're in that exam lane and you're making that impact every single day. You could jump into the world of academia if you love to, teach and educate patients. You could jump into leadership roles and be able to help coach and guide doctors and build, processes and systems to make sure that that patient journey is smooth. And hell, you can even become a podcaster and go out and educate the masses on how to do things better and more effectively and efficiently in the exam lane as well. So I'd love to really, start with, what are you doing now, but then also kind of help us navigate to how you got to where you're at, because there is
Yeah.
someone out there that's looking at this story and they're like, man, I need to be that Dr. Beatty, but my own version of it. Right.
Yeah, so today I am the Chief Medical Officer for MyEyeDr OD, and so all of the clinical pieces of the MyEyeDr practices report through my team, and we are responsible for developing and executing those things. And it is a very interesting position to hold because I really get to have influence over a number of patients in a number of ways that I could never do whenever I was seeing patients in clinic one at a time. And so from that side, it's extremely exciting and it's extremely rewarding. The patient care itself is probably the most rewarding thing you can do.
Yes.
And I grew up in the 80s, right? And so the 80s sitcoms were the thing. And if you think about any sitcom, you start off presented with a problem, and within 24 minutes, if you count the commercials, or if you don't count the commercials, you go from being presented with the problem to having a solve for that problem, executing the solve, and getting ready for the next show, right?
Right.
And optometry is really like that too. You start off with being presented a problem, and within inside of 20 or 30 minutes, you evaluate that problem, you come up with the solution for that problem, and you begin execution, and you actually get to see the result. And so that part is really cool. But you can only do that one patient at a time if you're a practicing optometrist. And so where I sit today, I get to do that a lot of times. And so
Yeah.
throughout our practices, we We see roughly 4 million patients a year, and I feel like my thumbprint is on a lot of those, if not all of those patient encounters, because of the things that we do.
Right, right. So that's mind blowing. I mean, 4 million patients per year. I got to say it again, 4 million patients a year. Like how I don't even understand how you navigate that many patients in 1 year, you know?
Well, if you think about it in individual terms, yeah, it feels impossible. But we've got an expert team of doctors who are doing ridiculously good work at the clinic level. And so our job is really to support them so that they can continue to do that work. Right. And so that comes in the form of understanding what it takes to be able to walk into an exam lane and have at your fingertips the things that you need in order to be able to keep that patient healthy, happy, and seeing well between visits. So from year to year, or if you're monitoring that patient for something that's more dire, from visit to visit. Right. And so I look at it still as one person, one patient, a set of eyes at a time. And are we providing for the doctor what they need to be able to take care of that patient? And are we providing for the patient the solutions that match what the doctor has recommended or prescribed for them? And so if you look at it in those terms, it's not insurmountable. It's just a matter of being able to coordinate that with teams of support doctors and an operational structure that allows for that to happen from clinic to clinic, from day to day.
Wow. Yeah, I love it because I'm a piece of it. I live it every day in that exam lane. Yes, I do see patients. People think I don't because I travel a lot for the business and constantly talking and things like that. But I do have all the right tools and resources in that exam lane, and I can provide comprehensive solutions. You know, Dr. Beatty, one thing I would love to touch on to really break all the rumors and the myths is, you know, my eye doctor. What is it? Tell us about it. Is it full scope? What's happening in the practices outside of some of the things that you touched on? Because I want to end all the rumors today because the whole world listens to this podcast and you have the platform, my friend. So let's go at it.
So I love the question, Dr. Glover, because I think it's one that comes up all the time. And I can wholeheartedly say that we as an organization, me as a practicing optometrist, support full scope optometry, whatever that means where you are. Right. And so, as you know very well, there is a large discrepancy. It's getting a little smaller, but there's a large discrepancy of the ability of optometrists to practice what they know based on what state they're practicing in.
Right.
And as scope continues to expand, we're able to see many more optometrists do the things that they've been educated to do, which is incredible.
Yeah.
The reality of it is that, a patient comes into a clinic, and largely they come into a clinic expecting that they're going to see better, maintain their vision, be able to see to do the things that they need to see. And if you ask a patient, which we all do, like, why are you here? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those patients, if not all those patients, will tell you that exact same thing. I want to see better. I want to see well. I want to be able to do the things that I need to do. Where it gets interesting is that the reason they see well or not is often some underlying condition. So we've got all the folks that have just traditional refractive error and they're otherwise are fantastically healthy. Then we have the folks that have refractive error, but it's compounded by having glaucoma or having a macular disease or having a diabetic retinopathy. And we find those things in our exams and we manage those things and we educate patients about them. And if you're in a state that has the ability to treat some of these things in a more advanced way, we treat those things. But we never lose sight of the fact that that patient wanted to see their best. And their expectation is that you're going to help them do that. And if you keep both of those things in balance, you end up with these practices that are able to do routine optometry, and they're able to do medical optometry, and they're able to combine them in a way that I think is actually very unique. Often, I think the comparison or the question about is it medical or not is because people don't understand how to actually apply both things at the same time to the same
Right.
individual. And they think that you can only do one or you can only do the other. And our strength is in being able to do both simultaneously all the time. And
Yeah.
so if we can do that, then I feel like I've been successful in being able to put my thumbprint on. And if we run into problems being able to do both, then we've got a lot more work to do, because there's no reason an optometrist can't both prescribe you glasses and contacts and make sure that you see well forever because they've taken care of your ocular disease.
I love it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to really break that down. I've screamed that for many, many moons, but to hear it from the chief medical officer, it goes a long ways. Now, I want to paint a picture. Student coming out of optometry school, trying to figure out how to navigate my career. Where do I start? Because there's so many things to explore. I don't know where to go. Guide me, mentor me, if you don't mind.
So the first thing I'll say is that your clinical expertise is where you have to start. And you can never take that piece for granted. And for any student that is graduating, I recommend wholeheartedly that you do spend time practicing optometry, no matter where you think you want your career to go. And that's important because you have to understand what it's like to relate to a patient. You have to understand how to create your North Star, which really should always be in making sure the patient gets their best possible outcome.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do that if you haven't spent the time in the lane, asking patients questions, getting them to feel and see better, and understanding what things you learned in the classroom really translate into day-to-day patient care versus those things that you never learned but become staples of what you do. And you just can't do that without the clinical piece. So first thing, I would not skip the clinical piece, even if your aspirations are to do other things. Then I think
I
you,
want to add one piece before you jump to the next thing, because I think that's
sure.
a huge piece, right? I remember when I came out of optometry school, I actually worked 6 days a week. I was putting in the work. I was getting it, right? But the one thing that I enjoyed during those 6 days is that I rotated through different clinics. And the thing about those different clinics is that they had different demographics. And the things about those different clinics is that they had different doctors working in those clinics as well. So I was able to rotate through those clinics and take the best practices from those doctors that were my colleagues at that time. But then also I was able to learn how to communicate with different demographics. There are all walks of life that walk through your doors. And I think it's important to be able to communicate with each and every one of them, because if you are able to communicate and build that trust, the outcomes that you provide are going to be unmatched. So for me, that was a huge opportunity to become a better doctor, because I was able to learn from those around me, but also understand the different demographics that walk through.
I couldn't have said it better, right? Like there is, and I think that's where that second point I was going to really speaks to that, right? Because you learn during your clinical time what parts of optometry speak to you most. You think that when you do your rotations as your externships, you're touching on all these different aspects, and that's by design, right? That's how those programs are put together. But once you are done with externships, you start to really realize where you go changes a lot about the types of patient encounters you're going to see.
Yeah.
And you also learn a lot about whether or not you really want to work with colleagues, right? There's some of us who enjoy clinic with people every day, right? Like I love it when I come and I can work with you and Dr. Whittington,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we can go see our patients, and in between we can talk about what happened,
Shut up.
But but there are other optometrists who they really want to be the only show, right? And it's not great for them to have other folks in the clinic. They like it that way, right? But you don't know any of those things until you've practiced some, and your opinions about what's important for you change as you do that. And
Right.
so there are people who graduate optometry school, they go into clinical practice, and they know from day one that they're going to be a vision therapist, right? They know that they're going to do pediatric optometry. And then they spend 3 months doing it, and they realize very quickly that this is not what I want to do. And so so it's really important to your point, that you test out some things. So if you are going to practice clinically, which I highly recommend that you do for at least some time, then check out the variety so that
Mhm.
you understand exactly what it is that feels good to you. And it may not be what you thought you were going to do originally that actually makes you excited. I never thought that I wanted to be an anterior segment person. Never, never. And um, and unlike my thousandth keratoconic patient, because once you get started, people find you and their friends refer them, and you're like, how does every keratocone know another keratocone?
Yeah,
And so but it became enjoyable. And so I built a practice around complex contact lens fitting that I never would have thought coming out of optometry school that's what I'd want to do. And so it came down to testing out some things. And to your point, it's really the only way to go.
I love it. I love it. So what I'm hearing is you got to develop that clinical expertise. You also have to look at, the variety of demographics or types of optometry to figure out if you truly love it or not like it, right? And I can attest to that because I thought I was going to do more with kids in optometry, but then as I started practicing, I realized that I only like my kids and not other folks' kids, right? So I really pivoted more into primary care, but also dabbling into dry eye. And patients, when they come to see me, they know I'm all about lens technology for glasses and high-end frames and also wearables, right? So I developed my
Yeah,
niche. But to your point, it took me time to develop my clinical expertise. It took me time to figure out what I did like and what I didn't like. And as a result of it, I'm able to go into that exam lane and be confident and make an impact every single day.
exactly. Exactly. And then there, I think you have to think about your long-term career is different from your short-term career.
Yeah.
And so as you start to think about, okay, now I've figured out that I like to be in this geography. I like this particular patient base. I like this aspect of optometry. Then you have to start to think, do I want to take care of patients every day on a one-to-one scale as my primary way of being an optometrist? Do I want to help other optometrists become great optometrists? Do I want to be look at it as a bigger picture and help research things that will help patients in optometry? Do I want to work with pharmaceutical companies there's so many different pieces, or
Yeah.
do I want to actually help run the business of optometry? And I think all of those aspects are great ways to continue practicing in the profession, that not necessarily on a daily basis are you dealing with one-on-one patient care. What's important though is that you never lose the ability to do one-on-one patient care, and that
Right.
you never lose touch with that part of optometry, because it really influences all the other aspects that you would ever touch or do. And to your earlier point about the why, right? If your why is centered around patients and patient outcomes, then it's easy to understand why you must continue to be part of that part of optometry to be successful in all the other aspects of optometry.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you broke it down. I have conversations with a lot of doctors that they've been out for about 10, 11 years and they just don't know where they want to go. And I think the main
Mhm.
reason is because they didn't have that, short-term game plan, that long-term game plan of, where their career is going to go. So I think it's very important when you get out of school, outside of the expertise, outside of looking at the different aspects of optometry, have a game plan, have your goals. Where do you want to go in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? How do you want to make an impact? Circling back to your why, as you touched on, and that'll make life a lot easier because I think what's happening right now, Dr. Beatty, is students are coming from school, they're jumping into practice, and they're not thinking about those things. And sometimes they get burned out because they don't know how dynamic optometry is. They don't realize that they can make a big impact inside the exam lane and outside the exam lane as well.
100% agree. And what I think is also important is that you have permission to change your mind, right? And
Absolutely.
and I think and I say that because there are people who have a very straight strategic path, right? Where they're like, I'm doing this and this is how it's going to work and this is where I'm going to go and I'm going to get there and it's going to be great. And then there's people who meander sometimes, right? Because they want to test out this, or they want to test out that. And they thought they wanted to do thing A, but it turns out that they'd much rather do thing B. And that's also fine. The key is understanding that you're always doing something that you feel like you're moving forward and that you always feel like you are achieving something while you're doing it, right? Because burnout really happens when you can't see your way forward anymore and you don't feel like the work that you do is impacting, right?
Oh, I
So
love that.
so being able to always look back and say, you know what, I had a hard day, but I made impact is not burnout. And that's the kind of thing that you want to be able to keep in focus when you're thinking about optometry careers. I'll tell you, um, I really love learning things, right? And so I told you that I went to business school before optometry school, even though I knew I was going to do the optometry thing. What I didn't tell you is that I had plans to go to law school that started after I started in optometry. So I was seeing patients and learning a lot about all my day to day. And I was at the same time learning about some of the things that optometrists run into on the professional side, on the liability side, on the scope side. And I thought, man, I would love to be able to help people, particularly optometrists, on the legal side. I think that's
Right.
really interesting. So I had actually started making plans for law school. This was back in 2012 or so. And I had gotten everything all filled out, had gotten ready, LSAT, everything. And that's when Sue Downs said, hey, I know that Eye Care Associates is going to be part of my eye doctor. We are really interested in doing more with the scope in North Carolina being different than it is in DMV. I'd love to have you on the team. And she had no idea that I was thinking about making a career change.
Right.
And I said, well, Sue, I'd be happy to help you with that. I think it would be really cool to help out the organization. But I got to tell you, I'm planning on going to law school. And she said, well, if you help me out for just a little bit, then you can make decisions about it. And so this is why people have permission to change their minds, right?
Right.
And so I said, that makes sense to me. Let's do it. I'm all in. And I've been all in now for 12 years. And so we'll see what happens down the road, right? Because I've
Yeah.
not given up my law ambitions, but I do get to work with a really cool legal team and they teach me stuff all the time. So I'm
Right.
also still learning. And so maybe that's the thing that is where I need to head instead of deciding to go to law school. But it's just one of those things in that even if I were to go and do law school, I would never lose touch with the clinical piece of optometry because it's just too important.
Right. I love that. And what I call that change is the power of the pivot. That's what I tell all my mentees because, hey, you remember I went to Nigeria. I went out there to
I
consult. I did
remember.
distribution. I opened up a clinic and I was out there, back and forth 4 or 5 years. And then I was like, I need to pivot. My wife and my son at the time was in the States and I was there primarily
Hmm.
and I missed them. Then the pandemic hit and reached back out to you. I said, man, I need a change, right? And from there, I was able to go from a PRN doctor to a part-time doctor to a full-time doctor to growing into leadership on our professional services team. So for all my optometry students, my new graduate doctors, my seasoned doctors, there is truly that power of the pivot. You can make it happen. But to
Hmm.
your point, keeping that clinical aspect as the core is going to allow you to get to where you need to be. Even though I was in Nigeria, I still came back to the States to make sure that I did not lose my clinical piece. So when I came into
Yeah.
town, I was seeing patients. And that always helped to guide me so that I wouldn't run into that burnout that you touched on earlier.
Hmm.
So we've touched on a lot. What I want to really navigate to next is truly the complexity of practice, the future of practice in eye care, because there's a lot going on right now, Dr. Beatty. When I'm in that exam lane, I got like 10 reps coming in talking to me about the eye drops. We got folks coming in talking about presbyopia drops. We got teleoptometry that's out there. We got insurance companies doing, things that, is impacting, our bottom lines. So I would love to really touch on, what it looks like in regards to the complexity of eye care, because it's getting real out here and changing day in and day out, my friend.
It is complex, and I don't think that the complexity is going to get any lighter in any time soon. And it's the miracle of being able to work with a large group, in that you start to understand how difficult it can be as a smaller group or an independent optometrist to navigate some of these things.
Right.
And I think it's one of those things that's very difficult to wrap your brain around, because we live in a world where we've got third party payers for a majority of people out there. We've got people who don't yet understand the difference between, this is a progressive lens, this is a single vision lens, I need an eye exam. An eye exam is not just a refraction. An eye exam is not just an online prescription verification. Like, there's this public piece of education that makes it complex, because as an optometrist, you know all these things, but your patients don't.
Right.
Then there is the technology piece, where we've got, this lens is better than that lens. We can wear this technology versus we hold this technology in our hands. These are the things I want to be able to do and see. And not to mention that the complexity of the environment means that our eyes have to do things today that they didn't have to do before, and they will have to do things tomorrow that they're not doing today. Right. And so trying to piece all that stuff together is complex, but then trying to piece it all together and still have a practice that is a sovereign and is going to be there year after year because you've managed to make money and be in business is also very difficult. And so what I would say, particularly for someone who's entering the field of optometry, is that the clinical aspect is super important. But at the same time, you've got to think about, if I'm going to be in the business of optometry, how do I make sure that I'm sustaining a business that allows me to now take care of my patient, not today, not tomorrow, but for as long as that patient needs me, right? And the decisions you make have to be decisions that are designed around longevity, and not decisions that are designed around just right now. And there's lots of help out there for people. I mean, even though we look at optometry and we say, man, this business is really complex, the principles of business apply to optometry just like they apply to general business practices, right? The principles of healthcare also apply to optometry. And so as you're looking at, what are hospital systems doing, and what are dentists doing, and how does this affect primary care physicians? What are internists thinking about it? You get to collect all this information, and you should be able to apply that to the way you're thinking about your practice as well.
Wow. I mean, that was perfectly broken down. What I would like to do next is really kind of dive into some specific cases that I always hear of people saying, like, what's going to happen to optometry? And I think one of the big ones, and while you're on the call that we can have a conversation about, is private equity. There are some folks out there that are like, I don't want any part of it. It's not great for optometry. I think we need to do more independent practices, and that's how we're going to save our profession. So I'd love for you to maybe touch on what private practice, or what private equity does to optometry, and where we stand as an organization at MyEyeDr as well.
Well, I think it's a very complex question. So let's just take it in pieces.
Okay.
So I think if you look at private equity in general, the persona that people put with private equity is that you've got a whole bunch of people who are putting money into the global, let's call it the profession as a whole, and their target is to extract money from the profession because they put money in. What people don't realize is that in any business, whether it's optometry or grocery stores or clothing stores, like there has to be money exchanged in order to provide the service. And so in a healthy private equity environment, there is investment, there is education, there is knowledge sharing, there's information sharing, and those pieces are used to strengthen the profession, strengthen the investment that is there, right? And in good cases, private equity understands that there's a management of the particular profession where people are experienced in the day to day. They understand how things operate and what the North Star should be. And the equity partner's job is to create an environment where those things that the management team or the individuals understand to be true can be executed on at an extremely high level. And so when you start to think about it like that, it becomes a little bit less scary,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Then you gotta think about what happens when you put things at scale. So that I love cars. Everybody else doesn't necessarily know that I love cars the way I love cars. But when you are thinking about technology like cars, as an example, if you've got one guy in a garage who's putting together a car, he is putting together this car and he's doing a really good job, right? But he's limited by the fact that he's got to find his own suppliers. He's got to purchase all the tools. He doesn't necessarily have manufacturing techniques that allow him to do some of the things that could be beneficial. If he's doing engine technology, he's got to find somebody to provide him with all these things, or else building the car would take this gentleman or this lady, would take them years and years and years to get a single one out, right?
Right.
Then you look at manufacturing with a scaled company, and all the best of the best this company is able to get because they're able to apply it to a number of cars that can go to individuals who help them recoup the cost of these cars, right? And it's kind of like that when you think about practicing in an individual practice versus practicing with a group of optometrists that may be part of some private equity group, in that in your individual practice, you're doing good work, just
Yeah.
like the guy in the garage, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you get a little bit limited because you can't buy enough frames that you're going to get a great discount on the frame. And so do you have to pass that on to the would-be purchaser of this one car that you're building? And then there's some frames you just can't get because you don't have that relationship. So now this car would have to go without that particular feature or part, versus if you're part of a larger group, you're almost guaranteed that whatever the variety of things that there need to be, you're going to have access to those things.
Right.
Right. And so in the end, I think you can build a great practice and be an individual practitioner, and you can do well. You just got to understand all the stuff, and you got to
Right.
find your own suppliers, and you got to build all the things, and you got to do it all by yourself. Or you can be part of a group and understand that there are going to be additional resources that don't change your ability to supply that individual patient with the fantastic service and the thing that they need. But now, whatever it is, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to have the ability to do it, because you're now part of a scale that provides you with the material and the outcome that you need to be able to do so. And I say all that because it is one thing to believe that investment in the profession ruins the profession. It's something totally different to be able to understand that investment in the profession makes it even better, even for the private practitioner, because you bring focus, you bring scope, you bring scale, you do all these things that allow for the profession itself to move, and that raises everybody's that raises everybody at the same time. And so, done correctly, it's actually something that is very, very helpful for
Yeah.
the model that we call optometry.
Yeah. Now, the way you broke it down from top to bottom, it brought more clarity, even to me, but also the followers and listeners that's listening to this podcast, because it is one of those questions that I get constantly asked, right? And you really elevated that question or that answer, and I'm thankful for that, because that's a question that I always get asked. Now, I want to kind of pivot to teleoptometry, because I feel like this is also something that a lot of doctors, regardless of where they're at in their career, optometry student, new grad, or seasoned, they fear. They feel like it
Yeah.
doesn't get the best care. They feel like it's one of those things that may replace them. So I'd love to have a little bit of dialogue around what your thoughts are and what that looks like as well.
So I can start by saying that no one is, and I really truly believe this, no one is looking at teleoptometry as a method of replacing doctors when it comes to providing comprehensive care, right? So it's an important distinction to think differently about teleoptometry, which I use in my reference point for teleoptometry would be providing comprehensive eye care, meaning it's synchronous. You're seeing images. You're directing testing. You're getting test results and interpreting those results, and you're working hand in hand with in-person care for referral purposes or double check purposes to make sure that patients are getting a great experience, but they're also protected and getting the best outcome. Versus things like let's call it remote refraction or the prescription verification or those types of services. Those things are different. If you're going to go and you're going to use a kiosk to essentially auto refract to get a refraction, that's different than looking at the source for me. I think it's important as optometrists, though, that we continue to educate patients on what comprehensive care or comprehensive exams are versus the refractive piece of the exam.
Right.
And so the more the consumer or the patient understands that there's a difference, the better we are at them understanding what they're actually getting into and less likely to cause a public health concern by not actually having a full eye exam. When you think about the teleoptometry side, though, I think that the technology involved in being able to see a patient remotely continues to evolve, and that the limitations in being able to diagnose and treat from afar that we experienced not even 5 or 6 years ago are becoming different limitations today. And so if we look at in-person care as the gold standard, and we say these things define in-person care, this is why it's important, this is why it's the standard, then I think over time, remote care will rise to very similar standards as the technology continues to increase. And so I think in today's world, it's all about being responsible. There are perhaps time limits on how people should be seen from a remote perspective. There may be specific history things that prevent people from being able to or shouldn't have a remote exam. I think there are lots of ways to take what is important about a patient's health, determine rules around how you want to deal with those things, and then apply teleoptometry in a way that gives patients who would not normally have access to care
Yes.
some form of access, so that we're not having a conversation about people who've lost vision or are no longer functional because we didn't have some sort of access for that patient to enter the healthcare system because we were afraid to do something from a teleoptometry perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, right? It's access to care. And that's what I tell a lot of students or doctors is that we have to be able to, meet patients where they're at. We have to be able to create access to them, because another problem that we're running into is there's a shortage in the workforce. We need more doctors. And as a result of that, we do have to think outside of the box. We do have to think, how do we stick to the standard of care that you touched on, but also provide other opportunities to get these patients in. So I really appreciate the clarity there.
Yeah, you made me laugh because you said, "Man, I came out of school, I was doing 6 days a week, I was doing this, I was doing that," and yes, you were, but not everybody who graduates today is doing that, right?
Right.
So if you actually look at the data for people who graduate, we have for every doctor full time that is retiring in the optometry workforce, we're still losing days of work relative to the people that are coming into the workforce,
Right.
not because of headcount. So if you look at headcount, we're actually growing the number of optometrists that are entering, but the number of days that those optometrists are practicing looks different than the number of days that exiting optometrists did when they came into the profession. And so that is back to your point, even though we're growing the profession, we still lack the ability to provide access to care for everybody who needs it. And so the teleoptometry arm is allowing for that access to happen. We just have to be responsible for making sure that once the patient enters the healthcare system, that we're adequately following up with that patient so that they're getting all the care that they need outside of that remote visit.
Yeah. Man, you've nailed everything that I wanted to touch on with complexities, but I want to ask you this. What keeps you up at night when it comes to optometry? Being in the seat that you're in, overseeing 1,600 plus doctors, what keeps you up at night? Because I know how your brain works. Other folks may not know. So I'm curious to know, what that is, my friend.
The major thing for me is maintaining the standards that I think are important for us to be able to take care of patients. So there are a lot of things to worry about. Those things are just daytime worries. The nighttime worry is that I wouldn't send my mother to do it because I don't think we're doing it well enough. And that's the kind of the standard I look at things through. So
Yeah.
I've called it the mama test, my
Yeah.
mother test,
Yeah.
in that if my mom can go into a clinic and she's having an experience that we think is phenomenal, she's got a great outcome, she's being followed properly, she's being cared for properly, then I feel good about what we're doing. What keeps me up at night is not being able to maintain that standard. And so all the things that I work on during the day are related to making sure that we have that repeatable standard in all the clinics, no matter who's coming in to visit. And if we can continue to do that, I'll get a good night's sleep. If I feel like we're not able to do it, then I'll be up.
We don't want to keep you up because then you're going to keep me up. So I appreciate that. Man, this has been a fantastic conversation. I mean, we've touched on your journey into eye care, right? We touched on how to navigate optometry and how to build a career. We touched on the complexities of where we're at in eye care as well. What I'd really like to dive into next is really understanding how to, walk that fine line between a career and also your identity, because this is huge. This is important. This is what it's all about at the end of the day. Do you have the identity that you truly want? Are you living your true purpose? And I think you're a great person to have this conversation with because you've done so much. I remember, and I'm not going to keep talking, I got so many stories. I remember being a technician when you first came out of school and seeing, I believe it was a yellow Porsche in the back of our office. And you were out there fixing something during break. I was like, what is this guy? What can he not do? Right. But you always figured out some kind of way to do everything that you want to do underneath the sun. So I would really love to have this conversation because this is something that can help all healthcare professionals and people in life in general.
So, Dr. Glover, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people through just conversation in exam lanes, through some of the interviews that I've done with other people, and there is a crisis that forms when your identity is what you do, and what you do is your identity.
Mm,
And the inability to be able to separate those causes a lot of trouble. So if we think about what happens when, let's say, a veteran is a ranking official in one of the armed forces, right? And that career comes to an end, and the veteran becomes lost. It's because they've tied who they are to the work that they did in the
right.
armed forces. You have a professional athlete who gets an injury, and that professional athlete no longer gets to play the sport, and they have a crisis. It's because they identified with the sport that became who
Right.
they were. And in in my world, understanding what I do is of utmost importance, because I don't discount the importance of making sure people are taken care of. But what I do and who I am are not the same thing. And I've had to learn over time to separate the two and put distinct separation lines there in order to be good at both of those things. Because I want to be good at who I am, right?
Right.
I want to be as good at who I am as I am at what I do. And
I feel
so
like
I
you need
have
that first before you can be good at what you do, right?
you absolutely do. You absolutely do. And so, if I had any advice, particularly for people who are entering the profession, is to make sure you understand all the things outside of your work that also matter for you,
Mm.
and figure out how to do some of those things while you're doing the work that you do, because it will make you better when you come to work. If when you leave work, you're able to do the things that make you you.
I love that.
And so I learned a lot of stuff. I actually learned a lot of things from you, as well. You were the first optometrist that I really looked at and said, man, this guy has he has a brand identity. He's got a work identity. He's got this home thing going. And I thought, wow, he's really figured this out. And you're right. Like I work on cars because it's fun. And so you collect these things, and then you kind of work on them and you get them ready. And then sometimes they find a new home, and sometimes they stick around. But but that's one of the ways that I spend my time, and it helps my brain, because one of the things that's interesting about life is that you actually learn how to problem solve by applying things that you've picked up somewhere else. So you can solve a lot of optometry problems by applying things that you learned mechanically somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And and so those things tie together. And so understanding who you are can actually be really beneficial for what you do, even if those things are not related.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I appreciate those kind words. And I want to kind of elaborate on what you touched on, especially when it comes to that identity. Something that has helped me in patient care is having those separate identities. When I have a patient come in, a lot of times it's because of a referral, or maybe it's because of my digital footprint. For
Mm,
example, a patient may come in and look at my Instagram page. And with them looking at that page, they see a couple of things. And I've shared this story on this podcast before, but what they'll see is that I'm a man of faith. I'm a father and husband, love my family. I love to travel, and I'm also a foodie, right? And I
mhm.
love the eye care profession. It just happens that I'm an optometrist. So a lot of times when patients come in, they're starting a conversation about one of those things, whether it's somewhere I traveled in the world or some kind of food that I had, and it resonates with them. And it just happens that I'm an optometrist, and I've already started to build that trust with them. But I started with understanding who I am as a person and becoming that person. And then I had my profession and my career, and I've been able to align both of those in a way where my family is still number one to me, but I still make a major impact in that exam lane as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredible story, because the what drew me to wanting to really have this conversation, because it's been years in the making, right?
Yeah.
Is that I've always been a behind the scenes kind of guy. So if you look at what my responsibilities are, you'd think, man, this guy must spend a lot of time out working with people, and the answer is I'm in clinics with people and I'm behind the scenes with our teams. But I'm not one of those folks that is always on the stage because I really like to get the work done. And so I spend a
Right.
lot of time doing that. But over the course of the last, I'll call it 24 months or so, I've also decided that I like being able to talk to people about some of the work that they do,
Yeah.
and I got that inspiration from you,
Oh man.
and now it's turned into this thing that's got its own life, right? So I actually run 3 shows, and it's been phenomenal. And so I have a show called Uncommonly Remarkable, which is the relatively newer show for me, in that it is really based on my thoughts around topics that I run into, and that branched from a conversation show that I have called Uncommonly Remarkable in Conversation, which is an interview based show. And then to your earlier point, I decided that, you know what, I really do like the mechanics of cars. And
Yeah.
so I launched the third show called Wrench and Reason, which is really about the underlying parts of car ownership and understanding particularly EVs and how they work. And so it keeps me busy, but it's kind of my finding myself to
Yeah.
allow me to do the work that I do. So
Yeah. Well, I want you to brag a little bit, Dr. Beatty, because this is something you never do, right? You never talk about the incredible work that you put out, the stats, the data. Like just beat your chest a little bit, my friend. You know, this the last show that you touched on. You're doing some incredible impressions, my friend. Please share with the listeners because, again, when they see a Dr. Artis Beatty, they think my eye doctor, they think chief medical officer, they think optometrist, they think game changer, which you are all of those people. But at the same time, you found your identity. You know who you are. You've been able to separate them. There is a time to celebrate and rejoice. And I want to do this on this show when it comes to the stats. Not my friend.
So I was not expecting that part. But I appreciate you bringing it up. So,
Yeah.
like I consider myself to be out of the prime age for YouTube, and I uncommonly remarkable in conversation were really built around audio podcasting and not really built for YouTube platforming. And so I find the YouTube platform to be absolutely fascinating, and the algorithm to be something that I just want to understand. And this is my problem. Like there's some things that I just look at and, oh, I got to understand this. And so I got stuck trying to understand it. So what Wrench and Reason is a opportunity for me to learn about the YouTube algorithm in a non optometry related, non almost anonymous way. So I didn't start Wrench and Reason, and tell anybody about it. I I started it. I went into the garage and I said, I'm going to record this video. So I recorded this video, and I made a new page. I put it on the video, put the video on the page, and I waited. And nothing happened. Just sat there. So I said, okay, well, let me figure this thing out. So I started learning about YouTube, probing, looking for topics, started recording more videos, and I was able to figure out how to apply the formula in a way that really spoke to people. And so that channel has been open now for 5 months or so. It's had 2.5 million impressions, and it has grown from a zero channel to something that is kind of cool now, without me having to tell anybody about it. So, like,
Yeah.
this is the first time I've ever actually get talked about it. You knew about it because I was like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start this YouTube channel. But it's been phenomenal, and it's great, and I really can't wait to see where it all goes, because it's important to be able to do those things that make you you. And that's one of the things that I think is cool, is being able to help people understand some of the topics from a mechanical car perspective that I just understand naturally. And it's been a really, really great journey.
I love it. I love it. Well, my friend, what I want to do next is I want to pivot to a different segment. We call this segment "What's Better, One or Two," and it's
Oh
to
boy.
get to know you a little bit more, right? We know that you're a car lover. We know that you like business. We know that you're, big into healthcare. But I want to dive a little more into the weeds. Now, some of these questions will have some eye care themes to it as well. But what I'm going to do is say two different names or words, and you tell me which one you prefer, right?
Okay.
I'm going to kick it off. And what I'm going to do is I am going to set my timer here to, right?
Oh boy.
That way we can jump into the weeds of it. All right, let's see here. We got 60 seconds here, ready to go, my friend. All right, so we're going to get started. Are you ready, Dr. Beatty?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Let's do it. All right, it's kicking off. All right, here we go. All right, Delta or American Airlines?
Delta.
Instagram or TikTok?
Instagram.
Shorts or jeans?
Jeans.
Porsche or Cadillac?
Don't make me choose. Cadillac.
I love it. Dog or cat?
Dog.
Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr.?
Oh gosh. MLK.
Zydra or Restasis?
Zydra.
Gucci or Prada?
Prada.
Soccer or basketball?
Basketball.
Ski or snorkel?
Snorkel.
Country music or pop music?
Oh God. I don't know. Pop. I'll go pop.
New York or LA?
Definitely LA.
Essilor or Zeiss?
I'm an Essilor fan.
That is it, my friend. We know Dr. Artis Beatty a little bit more, right? Those are some good answers, man. We align on a few. I'm a Cadillac guy. I've been driving them ever since I had that pretty D tag on my front of my Cadillac.
Oh my gosh.
2000
I'll never forget
model,
that one.
right?
I'll never forget that one. I'll never forget that one.
Well, man, this has been a fantastic show. I always like to end the show really with a segment known as "When It's Your Time to Retire Your Phoropter," right? And what this is all about is, what do you want to be known for? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind in eye care?
If I can leave eye care knowing that I've been able to help create a system that allows scalability in practices, whether it be 1 or 2 practices or 2,000 or 3,000 practices, and that we're providing a patient experience that meets or exceeds the expectation of that patient. We are applying some education that the patient never expected to get and didn't know that they needed. And we're able to provide for that patient materials and follow-up care that keep them happy and healthy over their lifetime. Then that's the legacy that I want to leave. And there's a lot of pieces that go into that. But if I can walk away from doing what I do to go off and forever be who I am, and understand that all those things are now part of the thread of optometry, the cloth that makes optometry, then I think I've been successful and left my thumbprint.
I love it. And I'm going to be a little selfish right now. I want to share with all my colleagues, since I have you on this interview, this podcast, I want you to mentor them. If you could leave them with one tip, one actionable step for their career to navigate, their career and their identity, or just navigate eye care, what would it be, Dr. Beatty?
If you wake up and you are dreading what you're about to do on your way to work, then you've not yet found the part of that is personalized for you and the part that you should be concentrating on. So each day you should really be excited to do what it is that you are going to do. And if that ever changes for you, then before you get to the end of that week, you should find out what it is that really will keep you excited so that you can make that change. Because remember, you have permission to change your mind.
I love it. Mic drop. I don't have a mic in my hand, but that was it right there, my friend, right? For all of those that are listening and they want to engage with you a little bit more, if you don't mind, maybe sharing the platforms where you have your shows and things like that so they could add to that impression count that you got going, my friend.
And so, yeah, if you want to learn, if you want to learn more about me and the things that I do outside of work, then it's really easy. You can go to uncommonlyremarkable.com. There you'll find links to all of the Uncommonly Remarkable shows, or you can go to wrenchandreason.com. That's just wrench, A&D, reason.com, to find out more about the car stuff. But if you'd like to know more about what happens when I am sitting behind the desk and working as an optometrist in my eye doctor, then going to myeyedr.com is a perfectly good place to start. You'll see links all over the place. And I'm also open to receiving emails about things too. And so I'm sure you'll put that in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Beatty, for being a part of this show. This has been very special to me for many reasons. And I just want to say thank you for, number one, always being there for me, always mentoring me, but most importantly, always pushing me. There's a few people in life that will challenge you, right? One, definitely being my wife, no doubt about that. Number two, my kids, 4 and 8, they always challenge me and I have to shut them down. But number three, you challenge me. You don't make it easy for me. You make me better and you make me think about things differently. And I challenge all my colleagues out there to start thinking differently, start thinking outside of the box, start thinking, where you want to go in the future. Have that 2-year plan, that 5-year plan, that 10-year plan. You want to make sure that you navigate this world the most efficiently, have the biggest impact and the biggest change, but you don't want to lose yourself in that as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Beatty, for being a part of this show. For all my colleagues out there, as always, stay healthy, stay positive, and stay blessed. And until next time, peace. Hey, family, if you enjoyed this full podcast, don't miss out on more engaging content. Check out the next episode right here. And for the latest updates, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support means the world to us. Catch us in the next episode. Peace.